What happens when America's most trusted morning show host decides she's had enough of carefully crafted PR responses and decides to ask the questions everyone's been thinking? Well, you're about to find out, because what unfolded on Good Morning America left viewers absolutely speechless and created one of the most talked about television moments in recent history. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story has more twists than you could ever imagine. Robin Roberts sat across from Meghan Markle in the pristine Good Morning America studio, the familiar morning show lighting casting its warm glow over what was supposed to be a standard promotional interview. Meghan had arrived impeccably dressed, her media training evident in every calculated smile and rehearsed gesture. The Duchess had been making rounds on various shows, promoting her latest venture with the same polished talking points that had become as predictable as sunrise. "Meghan, thank you for joining us this morning," Robin began, her voice carrying that authoritative warmth that had made her a household name for decades. "You've been quite busy lately with your new projects. Tell us what's driving this latest chapter in your life." Meghan shifted slightly in her chair, her smile never wavering as she launched into what sounded like a well-rehearsed response. "Robin, thank you so much for having me. You know, this new venture is really about authentic storytelling and creating content that matters. It's about using our platform to lift up voices that haven't been heard and creating meaningful change in the world." Robin nodded politely, but there was something different in her expression, a slight tightening around her eyes that seasoned television viewers might have recognized as a warning sign. "That's interesting, Meghan. Authentic storytelling. That's a phrase you've used quite a bit lately. But I have to ask, and forgive me for being direct, but how do you reconcile talking about authenticity when so many people feel like they've never gotten the authentic version of your story?" The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Meghan's smile flickered for just a fraction of a second before returning full force, but Robin had caught it. The Duchess straightened in her chair, her media training kicking into high gear. "Well, Robin, I think authenticity means different things to different people," Meghan replied, her voice maintaining its carefully modulated tone. "What I've always tried to do is speak my truth and share my experiences honestly. Sometimes that makes people uncomfortable, but I believe it's important to be genuine about your journey." Robin leaned forward slightly, and viewers at home could sense the shift in energy. This wasn't going to be another softball interview filled with predetermined questions and safe answers. Speaking your truth, yes, that's another phrase we've heard from you frequently. But Meghan, there's speaking your truth, and then there's acknowledging when your truth might conflict with documented facts or other people's experiences. Don't you think there's a difference? The studio seemed to grow quieter, even the usual bustling sounds of a live morning show fading into the background. Meghan's posture became more rigid, though she maintained her composure with the skill of someone who had navigated countless media appearances. "Robin, I think that's a very loaded question," Meghan said, her tone still controlled, but with a slight edge creeping in. "What I've shared about my experiences has always been honest. I've been very careful to speak only about my own perspective and my own feelings. I can't control how other people interpret or react to that, but that's exactly what I'm getting at," Robin pressed, her journalistic instincts fully engaged now. "When you speak publicly about your experiences, especially when those experiences involve other people, don't you think there's a responsibility to consider the full context, to acknowledge that there might be multiple sides to every story?" Meghan's carefully constructed facade began to show the first real cracks. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and her hands, which had been resting gracefully in her lap, now gripped the arms of her chair just a little too tightly. "Robin, with all due respect, I find it interesting that you're questioning my responsibility when it comes to telling my story," Meghan replied, her voice taking on a cooler tone. "I've been nothing but respectful about the people in my life, even when that courtesy hasn't always been returned. I've chosen to focus on moving forward rather than dwelling on past conflicts." Robin's expression remained professional, but there was steel beneath the surface now. She had covered politics, natural disasters, and countless high-stakes interviews throughout her career. She knew when someone was deflecting, and she wasn't about to let it slide. "Moving forward is admirable, Meghan, but sometimes moving forward means taking accountability for your part in those conflicts," Robin said, her words measured but pointed. "You've made some very serious allegations over the years, Allegations about racism, about lack of support, about feeling isolated and abandoned. These are heavy accusations that have had real consequences for real people. Don't you think those people deserve more than just your version of events? The tension in the studio was now palpable. Meghan's composed mask slipped further as she processed Robin's words. Clearly not expecting this level of direct questioning from someone she likely assumed would be another friendly interviewer. "I'm sorry, Robin, but I have to push back on that characterization," Meghan said, her voice rising slightly. "Those weren't allegations. Those were my lived experiences. When I talk about feeling isolated or unsupported, I'm not making accusations against anyone specifically. I'm sharing how those situations made me feel. Are you suggesting that my feelings aren't valid?" Robin maintained her steady gaze, unflinching in the face of Meghan's growing defensiveness. "Your feelings are absolutely valid, Meghan. No one is questioning that. But feelings and facts aren't always the same thing. When you share your feelings on a global platform, especially when those feelings paint others in a negative light, don't you think context matters? Don't you think your audience deserves the full picture?" The Duchess was visibly struggling now to maintain her composure. The careful choreography of her usual media appearances was falling apart under Robin's relentless but fair questioning. What had started as a routine promotional interview was rapidly becoming something much more significant. "Robin, I have to say I'm quite surprised by this line of questioning," Meghan replied, her voice now carrying a distinct chill. "I came here to talk about my new projects, about the positive work I'm doing. Instead, you seem more interested in relitigating old conflicts and questioning my integrity. Is this really what Good Morning America has become? A platform for tearing down women who are trying to make a difference?" The accusation hit the studio like a lightning bolt. Robin Roberts, a woman who had built her reputation on fairness and integrity over decades of journalism, sat perfectly still for a moment as Meghan's words settled in the air. The suggestion that she was somehow tearing down women was clearly not something the veteran broadcaster had expected, and certainly not something she was going to let stand unchallenged. "Meghan, I need to stop you right there," Robin said, her voice carrying a new authority that made it clear the gloves were officially off. "I've spent my entire career championing women, lifting up women, and giving women a platform to tell their stories. What I don't do is give anyone, man or woman, a free pass to avoid accountability simply because they claim to be doing good work. That's not journalism, that's public relations." Meghan's eyes flashed with something that looked dangerously close to anger, though she was still fighting to maintain some semblance of her media-trained composure. "Accountability for what? Exactly, Robin? For leaving a situation that was harmful to my mental health. For speaking up about my experiences, for choosing my family's well-being over institutional expectations." "Accountability for the impact of your words," Robin shot back without hesitation. "You can't claim to want privacy while simultaneously doing tell-all interviews that reach millions of people. You can't say you want to move forward while continuing to reference past grievances in every public appearance. And you certainly can't position yourself as a victim while building an entire brand around that victimhood." The words hung in the studio air like a challenge thrown down between two heavyweight fighters. Meghan's carefully maintained facade cracked completely now, her true feelings breaking through the polished exterior she had worked so hard to maintain. "Excuse me," Meghan said, her voice rising to a level that was definitely not media training. "Approved? Did you just accuse me of building a brand around victimhood? Are you seriously suggesting that speaking about discrimination and mental health struggles is somehow calculated? Do you have any idea how insulting that is?" Robin didn't back down an inch. If anything, she seemed to grow more resolute in the face of Meghan's emotional response. "What I'm suggesting, Meghan, is that there's a pattern here. Every time you face criticism or uncomfortable questions, the response is the same. It's either racism or sexism or some form of persecution. At what point do you consider that maybe, just maybe, some of that criticism might be valid feedback rather than evidence of a conspiracy against you?" The Duchess was now fully animated, her hands gesturing emphatically as she spoke. Gone was the serene, composed woman who had walked into the studio less than 10 minutes earlier. In her place sat someone who was clearly struggling to process being challenged so directly on live television. "Robin, this is absolutely unbelievable," Meghan said, shaking her head in apparent disbelief. "You're sitting here on national television, invalidating my experiences with racism and mental health struggles. Do you understand the message you're sending to other women who might be watching this? Women who have faced similar challenges, Robbins?" The response was swift and cutting. "The message I'm sending, Meghan, is that having difficult experiences doesn't make you immune from criticism. It doesn't give you a permanent victim card that you can play whenever someone asks you tough questions. And it certainly doesn't mean that everyone who disagrees with you or questions your behavior is automatically a racist or a misogynist." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees as both women stared at each other across the interview desk. This was no longer a celebrity interview or even a contentious political discussion. This had become something much more personal and much more significant. "You know what, Robin?" Meghan said, her voice now carrying a tone that could cut glass. "I think I know exactly what this is about. This is about putting me in my place, isn't it? Reminding me that I should be grateful for any platform I'm given, and that I should never, ever speak up when things aren't right. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but those days are over for me." Robin's laugh was short and entirely without humor. "Meghan, this has nothing to do with putting you in your place. This has everything to do with expecting the same level of honesty and accountability from you that we would expect from any other public figure. The fact that you immediately jumped to the conclusion that tough questions must be about silencing you says more about your mindset than it does about my intentions." "My mindset," Meghan repeated, her voice climbing another octave. "My mindset is that I've been through enough scrutiny and enough attacks to recognize when someone is trying to tear me down. And frankly, Robin, I expected better from you. I expected a woman who has faced her own challenges in this industry to understand what it's like to be constantly questioned and doubted." Robin's eyes narrowed slightly, and for the first time in the interview, her professional composure showed real cracks. "Don't you dare try to make this about sisterhood, Meghan. Don't you dare suggest that supporting women means never asking them difficult questions or never holding them accountable for their actions. I've earned my place in this industry through decades of honest journalism, not by expecting special treatment because of my gender or my race." The comment clearly struck a nerve with Meghan, who leaned forward in her chair with an intensity that was impossible to miss. "So that's what you think this is about? Special treatment? You think that asking for basic respect and understanding is asking for special treatment?" "What I think," Robin replied, matching Meghan's intensity, "is that you've confused respect with reverence. Respect means being treated fairly and having your experiences acknowledged. Reverence means being treated as if you're above criticism or questioning. The world doesn't owe you reverence, Meghan. Nobody gets that." Meghan sat back in her chair as if she had been physically struck. For several seconds, she said nothing, simply staring at Robin with an expression that seemed to cycle through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been hurt. "I can't believe what I'm hearing," she finally said, her voice now quieter but no less intense. "I came here in good faith to discuss my work, my projects, the positive impact I'm trying to make. Instead, I'm being ambushed by someone I thought would understand the importance of supporting women who are trying to make a difference." Robin's response was immediate and unforgiving. "Meghan, if discussing your public statements and asking you to defend your positions feels like an ambush to you, then maybe you're not ready for the level of public life you've chosen. This isn't an attack, this is journalism. And if you can't handle basic journalistic scrutiny, then maybe you should reconsider whether you really want to be a public figure." The silence that followed was deafening. Both women sat staring at each other across the interview desk, the weight of what had just been said settling over the studio like a heavy blanket. The carefully constructed world of celebrity interviews and promotional appearances had been completely shattered, replaced by something raw and real and utterly unprecedented. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, both women locked in a staring contest that had moved far beyond professional disagreement into something much more primal. It was Meghan who finally broke first, her composure cracking completely as she processed the full impact of Robin's devastating assessment. "You know what, Robin?" Meghan said, her voice now trembling with barely controlled emotion. "I think I see exactly what this is. This is jealousy, pure and simple. You've been in this industry for decades, paying your dues, working your way up slowly, And then someone like me comes along and gets a platform that you think I haven't earned. That's what this is really about, isn't it? The accusation was so far off the mark and so personally insulting that Robin actually laughed, a sound that was equal parts disbelief and genuine amusement. Jealousy. Meghan, I've interviewed presidents, covered natural disasters, reported from war zones, and built a career based on integrity and hard work. What exactly would I be jealous of? Your ability to turn every conversation into a referendum on how poorly you've been treated. Meghan's face flushed red with anger, all pretense of media training completely abandoned now. How dare you minimize what I've been through? How dare you sit there in your comfortable position and judge me for speaking up about injustice? You have no idea what it's like to be attacked constantly, to have every move you make scrutinized and criticized. Actually, Meghan, I know exactly what that's like, Robin replied, her voice cutting through Meghan's emotional outburst like a knife. The difference is that I didn't build my entire public persona around being a victim of that scrutiny. Didn't use it as an excuse to avoid accountability, or as a weapon to silence anyone who dared to question me. I did my job, I proved my worth, and I earned my respect through my work, not through my grievances. The comparison hit Meghan like a slap across the face. She sat there for a moment, mouth slightly open, clearly struggling to process what Robin had just said. When she finally found her voice, it was barely above a whisper, but it carried more venom than anything she had said up to that point. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Meghan said, her eyes blazing with fury. You think because you've been here longer, because you've played by their rules for decades, that somehow makes you more worthy? Well, let me tell you something, Robin. I refuse to be grateful for scraps. I refuse to accept that speaking up for myself makes me difficult or demanding. And I certainly refuse to be lectured by someone who clearly sold out her own principles long ago just to keep her seat at their table. The personal attack was so vicious and so completely unfounded that, for a moment, Robin seemed genuinely taken aback, but then something shifted in her expression, a hardening that suggested Meghan had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Sold out my principles, Robin repeated, her voice now carrying a dangerous quiet that anyone who knew her would have recognized as a warning sign. Meghan, I've spent my career fighting for truth, for accuracy, for giving voice to people who actually needed to be heard, not people who already had every privilege and platform imaginable and just wanted more sympathy. You want to talk about selling out principles? Let's talk about using serious issues like mental health and racism as shield to deflect from legitimate criticism about your behavior. Meghan shot to her feet so quickly that her chair actually moved backward, the scraping sound echoing through the now deadly quiet studio. I am not using anything as a shield,